So I was telling you on Monday that I would talk about another thing that in my news room, okay? Because you never know what's going to come up that's going to make you think of the room. And and like I said before, when you see other people do things that you don't like or that seem wrong to you, then ask yourself, do I do something similar? Or do I have that kind of motivation? So after Trump was, the Senate decided not to evict him from office, he has gone on, uh, mm, I want to say rampage, but that may be too strong, but it may not be too strong. Anyway, he has kind of purged a lot of people, um, especially the people who testified during the House investigation. And so those people who were testifying were government employees, they were in the Foreign Service. And you may have remember me saying at the time that they were testifying in the hearings, how much I respected those people, because it dawned on me, so much how many people are involved in the Foreign Service and what they have to do, uh, to keep our relationships with other countries going well. And I was very also impressed with how they spoke in a very even tone. They didn't use a lot of emotionally laden words or show any partisanship. They just said what happened, and they would say certain things disturbed them and why. Okay, so then after he wasn't evicted from office, then he is firing all those people, a lot of those people, or many of them have resigned of their own accord. Yeah. And when he's firing them, it's not just, with a few of the people, he could have let them stay in their present position a few more months because they were on rotating things, and then they would have been rotated out. And, no sweat off anybody's back. But no, he really wanted to fire them. There was the wish to inflict pain. Okay, I can't read somebody else's mind, but is the motivation that seems apparent by the tweets and the actions and so on. And and then recently, Stone, one of his friends, um, he was convicted of lying to Congress and all sorts of things like that. And the prosecutors in the case recommended 7 to 9 years. The president tweeted, "That's injustice. This guy didn't do anything, da 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 da." And right away, the Justice Department overrode their 4 prosecutors and said that 7 to 9 years was too much. And those prosecutors resigned in protest, all 4 of them. And then more tweets followed insulting them and insulting the judge. Okay. Uh, so it's reminding me of 2 things here. One is one of the first Dharma teachings I went to. My teacher was saying, if all we do in our lives is help our friends and harm our enemies, we're no better than dogs and other animals, because that's basically what animals do. They help their friends and harm their enemies. And that really stopped me in my tracks and made me think. Yeah, because it's true. When, our life revolves around that kind of bias, helping the people we like, harming the people we don't like, we really are acting like animals in the behavior. We may use more sophisticated means to help someone or harm them, but the mental attitude is the same. Okay, so it really made me to think about and about that, and how in so many parts of our society, it's acceptable and even seen as desirable to help your friends and harm your enemies, especially the harm your enemies part, which involves retaliation. Okay. And so this is when you look at the sociology of gangs, this is very much what gangs are about. You help your friends and you harm your enemies, and you have the same friends and the same enemies. Unless one of your friends does something you don't like, then they go in the enemy category. Yeah. And so recently, somebody in the um, one of the Aryan Brotherhood groups, they killed one of their own because he did something that they didn't like. Yeah. So everything is based on this kind of um, division in the mind into these are good and these are bad and these I help and these I harm. And, when we see other people do it and it seems so unfair, yeah, because we may have different categories for helpers and harmers than they do. But that may trouble us. But what troubles me more is when I look at my own mind and I say, when I want to retaliate, yeah, and harm somebody in retribution for what they did to me, what kind of mental state do I have? And when I look at that mental state, because it's come up in my life, yeah, let's admit it, has ever come up in your life? Yeah. When I look at that mental state, it is so disgusting and so opposite of the kind of person I want to be that I just look at that mental state and it's like, bleh. And and then to think all these people who are, when he's doing the purge and he's, getting his retribution for people who quote quote harmed him, although it wasn't anything personal, and they were telling the truth. Just to think of that mental state that people suffer from when they have that kind of mentality, and then so my own feeling of like just disgust at my mental state when of wanting retribution. And then all I have to do when that mind comes up is to stop and ask myself, what kind of human being does that make me when I want to harm somebody and rejoice at harming them? Yeah. Not only have the motivation to harm, but rejoice afterwards and think, oh, good, I got even, they're not going to mess with me anymore. To me, it's like all that is so vile. And like, what kind of person does that make me that rejoices at harming at others? And as soon as I think like that, it's like that motivation goes away because it's so obvious, like that's not the kind of person I want to be. Yeah. So I think, for all of us to look inside and see about that. I have, one of our supporters gave me the book called The Nazi Doctors. It's been sitting in my room for a while, and I haven't picked it up yet. But this morning, I just opened it, and there was one quote in it, just like that. And it was talking about how the doctors at Auschwitz, you know, the quote was from another prison doctor. And he said, these are nice chaps. We talk, we kid, they're witty, they're helpful. We socialize with them, they don't seem like evil people or troubled people at all. And I was thinking, yeah, that's what happens when we have that motivation to harm and rejoice at harming. And that gets supported by the environment we're in, whereby we can section off part of our mind, and one part of the mind does horrible things to others, and the other part of the mind is civil and kind and gracious to other people. And somehow you can work it so that at least on the manifest level, it doesn't appear that you're troubled by what you do. How those Nazi doctors didn't seem troubled by the experiments they did on living human beings. Yeah. And the quote, quote, euthanasia. Yeah. How they didn't seem troubled by that. And how we can section that off and seemingly not be troubled. But I have a feeling that deep inside, everybody has some sense of ethical conduct. And most people would feel bad, but we paint it over, we whitewash it, we rationalize it, we do something, justify it, so that we can keep on living with ourselves after we have behaved abominably with others. But I think maybe this is, that feeling I have that everybody has some conscience somewhere, or some sense of ethics somewhere. Maybe that's how it fits in with karma, because we do an action, the action ceases, the karmic action ceases, but the imprint is there in the mind. And that imprint will ripen when conditions come up. So that if somebody has behaved horribly and exacted their retribution, the imprint of their motivation, the imprint of that action is there and will arise, not just in their own experience and what rebirth they take, but inside their own mind as to how they feel about themselves when they're dying. Yeah. And the kind of regret that some people manifest as they're dying. That part of that karmic seed comes, ripens in that specific way. But anyway, seeing this kind of thing in the news, like I said, is a very good reminder to look inside and see what we do and how this whole mechanism functions within ourselves, because it's a part of the mind that certainly, if we aspire to be bodhisattvas, we have to excise this kind of mind. It doesn't go with bodhisattvahood. Mm-hmm.
A lot of people justify their desire for revenge or retaliation by appealing to justice.
Justice,
needs
yeah.
to be served, and our
right.
penal system does that
Yeah,
too.
and that's how people justify it. And that's the thing coming externally from society that enables us to ignore our bad deeds. Okay? But, I've never heard in Buddhism the word for justice. Yeah? Does anybody ever hear their teachers speak about justice? I've never heard that as a Buddhist concept. There's cause and effect. You do this action and that brings an effect. But nothing about other human beings having to, retaliate to make it just. Yeah, that's really not, you don't find that idea in Buddhism. Mhm. And what you find instead, like in Precious Garland by Nagarjuna, when he's talking about how the king should relate to all the prisoners, he talks about freeing them when they're ready to be freed. And even ones who want to, reoffend, you don't kill them, you banish them to another land, hoping that maybe they can go there and start over again and be better people. Yeah. But there's no idea that harming somebody is going to make you feel better because you got even. Yeah.
Just recently read an abstract of someone's paper examining the motivation of the monk that assassinated King Long Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
And the discussion, I guess, that's gone on for centuries about whether it was a bodhisattva act to assassinate that king to preserve the Dharma and so forth. But so you could look in terms of justice that might fall in that category of justice or retaliation. But even then, the debate is clearly about motivation, result, number of people benefited or harmed, the person who did the action being willing to take on the karmic result of their
Yes.
action. So that's as close to justice, I think, as I've ever
Yeah.
heard.
But the motivation, when you want to, in that case, stop somebody from harming a great group of people, you're not trying to get even. You're not trying to make it just. Your motivation is to prevent suffering. So that's very different than a motivation of you hit me, I'm entitled to hit you back. The motivations are completely different. Yeah? And the fact that the person who acts like that is willing to bear the karmic result of doing it. Whereas, or any result, even the result this life, they're willing to do that out of a compassionate motivation. Whereas if you look, you know, uh, purging and harming the people who testified, that led to the impeachment, you're not trying to benefit the country or and you're not willing to accept any kind of problems as a result of that behavior. Rather, the thing is, you feel entitled to do that, and and it's good to do it, and it's a way of exacting quote quote justice, and of supposedly preventing other people from harming you in the future by terrorizing them. Yeah. And so here too is another point, um, that we confuse respect and fear. Yeah, and I find this sometimes with the guys I work with who are incarcerated. Yeah, they feel that somebody respects them if people are afraid of them. Yeah, so you exact your retribution, or you threaten people, or you terrorize people, and then because they're afraid, then they don't do things. Yeah. And they become, you know, yeah. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you just don't do much. Yeah, because you're afraid. And some people in power interpret that as respect. They confuse fear with respect. Yeah. In the way I see it, fear and respect are two entirely different things. Yeah. Usually, the people I fear, I don't respect, because I respect people because they have good qualities. And if I'm afraid of them, it's because they're usually exercising their bad qualities. Yeah. Um, Yeah, so to really also think deeply about the difference between fear and respect and see if we get them confused. Yeah. And when we feel that people don't respect us enough, do we try and harm them in some way or make them uncomfortable or make them fearful, thinking that then they will respect us, meaning that then they will leave us alone or they will do what we want? But then to ask ourselves, is that really people respecting us? Or is that just them being afraid? And if I want people to respect me, do I gain actual respect by causing them problems? Or do I gain actual respect by being an ethical, compassionate person who behaves in a fair way? Yeah, because we may have tinges of that inside us too. Yeah, like let's see if I could just make people a little bit uncomfortable or, push their buttons, and then they'll be nice to me because they respect me, meaning then they'll fear me. But that's not respect. Okay, I better stop.